Hello everyone, how's it going? Welcome to Crack a Pack a Day. Every day, I'm going to open a booster pack of Magic the Gathering cards and evaluate the contents, choosing one of them to take, as if I were taking part in a draft and this was pack 1, pick 1. Today, we're going to be opening a pack of Battle for Zendikar, so let's crack it and take a look. Our first card is Call the Scions, a sorcery for 2 and a green. It has Devoid, and you put 2 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature tokens onto the battlefield that have sacrifice this creature, add 1 to your mana pool. Getting 2 power and toughness for 3 mana isn't the best, but the fact that they're Scions gives a little boost to this spell. It's spread over 2 bodies, which is good against most removal, and either or both can be sacrificed for mana later in the game. Casting this on turn 3 to hold off an opponent's 2 toughness attacker, then casting a 6-drop on turn 4 doesn't seem like it'd be too hard to do. All in all, I think this is a pretty solid card to start today's pack off with. Unless this pack is weak, then I probably won't take it, but the option is there. Royal Mage's Trick is an instant for 3 and a blue. It has Converge, so creatures your opponents control get -X/-0 until end of turn, where X is the number of colors of mana spent to cast this spell. Then, you draw a card. Casting this with only 1 or 2 colors of mana isn't terrible, as that will probably be enough to make enough of your opponent's creatures weak enough that you can make profitable blocks. And if you use this on the attack, then your opponent will likely lose a whole load of creatures he or she wasn't expecting to. Since this card replaces itself, you're even on card advantage, and only in exceptional circumstances are you not going to get some value off of it. Overall, this seems like a pretty nice card. I feel it has the potential to do a lot of work, and I could see myself picking this first. Swarm Surge is a sorcery for 2 and a black. It has Devoid, and gives creatures you control +2/+0 until end of turn. Colorless creatures you control also gain First Strike until end of turn. As a pump spell, this seems a little pricey for what you get. Sure, if you've got a board full of creatures, and your opponent has no blockers, then this will shave a turn or 2 off of killing your opponent. But if your opponent has blockers of any kind, then you'll likely just trade your team for theirs. The fact that your creatures get no toughness bonus is pretty bad. Giving your colorless creatures First Strike helps to offset this somewhat, but that entails you having a bunch of colorless creatures to get the most out of this spell. The fact that it's a sorcery means that you have to telegraph doing this, and you can't use it as a surprise at all. All in all, this spell can help you when you're already winning, but it doesn't really help you out at any other time. I just can't consider taking this first. Fortified Rampart is an 0/6 wall for 1 and a white. It has Defender. Getting 6 points of stats for 2 mana seems like a good deal, but unfortunately it can't help you win the game at all. It'll certainly draw the game out longer by holding off your opponent's ground creatures, so you're going to want this in a deck with a good endgame or with cheap evasive creatures. Overall, this is a card that helps with 1 or 2 specific strategies, but isn't good enough to take pack 1 pick 1. Nettle Drone is a 3/1 Eldrazi drone for 2 and a red. It has Devoid, you can tap it to deal 1 damage to each opponent, and whenever you cast a colorless spell, you untap it. Having 3 power is nice on both offense and defense, though you'll have to be careful with that 1 toughness. But if you can't attack past your opponent's creatures, then you can at least ping your opponent to death using the tap ability. The last ability means that it'll do best in a deck that has a lot of colorless spells in it, But I don't think that's a requirement for this card, simply a nice upside in the right deck. Overall, I see Nettle Drone as a solid card. I don't think it's quite good enough to want to take first, but it might be worth considering slightly later. Mortuary Mire is a land that enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, you may put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. Also, it can tap for a black mana. Usually, you want your lands that enter play tapped on your first turn, but this cycle of lands gives you reasons to care about having them later in the game. Mortuary Mire, in particular, works very well later in the game, assuming that you've lost one of your better creatures already. Whilst it doesn't draw you a card, it does guarantee that your next card draw is a good one. If you don't have any good creatures in your graveyard when you play this, then you're probably not going to want to use the ability. And watch out if your opponent has anything with Ingest, as the card will just get exiled if their creature hits you. Overall, the power level of this card is quite variable, as it depends on the quality of creatures in your graveyard. It's not something you want to pick first, though. Natural Connection is an instant for 2 and a green. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. As a pure ramp spell, this is inefficient. Paying 3 mana for this effect, even at instant speed, is a little too much. You'd much rather cast a creature on turn 3 instead. Likewise, counting on this to search for a single basic land to power your converge spells isn't very efficient either. This is, however, one of the few ways to trigger landfall at instant speed, so it opens you up to doing it in the middle of combat or on your opponent's turn. The power level of doing that will depend solely on how many landfall creatures you have and how good their triggers are. Overall, I don't think this is worth it just for the ramp, just for enabling converge, or just for the landfall triggers. But if you need at least 2 of those, then this is worth considering. I won't be taking it first here, though. Tightening Coils is an aura for 1 and a blue. It enchants a creature, which gets -6/-0 and loses flying. This seems like a pretty efficient piece of removal. It doesn't actually remove the creature, but it does make sure that, for the most part, it's not going to do much for the rest of the game. It does have the weakness that it can be removed, or that the creature underneath it can be returned to its owner's hand, but that's a weakness you're likely willing to accept for only 2 mana. Since the creature sticks around, it can still block, even if it can't deal damage, so using this on a high toughness creature might cause you problems later in the game. Overall, this seems like pretty good removal in blue, as long as you keep its limitations in mind. I think there's a chance I might take this first. Eldrazi Devastator is an 8/9 Eldrazi for 8 colourless mana. It has trample. As an 8-drop, you're not going to want to put this into your average deck. You're not going to see 8 lands for a long time, so you're going to need some kind of ramp, whether that's via spells like Natural Connection or via Scion tokens. As for what you get for your mana, it's okay. It's a little hard to remove, and the trample is nice, but it's nothing exciting. Overall, this is an average finisher in a ramp deck. You can afford to take it much later than pack 1 pick 1. Demon's Grasp is a sorcery for 4 and a black. Target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. This is powerful if inefficient removal. For the most part, you're spending 5 mana to kill most creatures that cost 5 mana or less, so it's hard to come out ahead in terms of mana spent. It's not unconditional, and won't do a lot to help against your opponent's biggest threats, but this is good against the majority of creatures in your opponent's deck. Overall, I feel that despite the downsides, this is a powerful spell. I can easily see myself picking this first. Our first uncommon is Angel of Renewal, a 4/4 angel ally for 5 and a white. It has flying, and when it enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life for each creature you control. A 4/4 with flying for 6 is a little expensive, but it's a good body nonetheless. You'll probably play it anyway, especially in an ally deck. The last ability isn't bad. It's a nice little bonus that goes on top of the good body. Since it's a creature itself, you should gain 1 life off of it, and if you have a reasonable board state, then it's not hard to see that you might gain 4 or 5. Overall, this seems like a solid card, especially for an ally deck, though I don't really fancy taking it first. Breaker of Armies is a 10/8 Eldrazi for 8 colorless mana. All creatures able to block Breaker of Armies do so. As mentioned before, 8 mana is just too much to consider playing this card without any kind of ramp. But if you do get up there, then this card is superior to Eldrazi Devastator in almost every single way. 10 power and 8 toughness is an awful lot. When you attack, you're likely going to wipe out most of your opponent's creatures, and if they didn't have 8 power themselves, then you're going to have this next turn too. This is a better finisher in a ramp deck than Eldrazi Devastator, but has the same caveats. You're going to want to know that you're in a ramp deck before you even think about taking this. Retreat to Valakut is an enchantment for 2 and a red. It has a landfall ability, so whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you choose to either give target creature +2/+0 until end of turn, or make it so target creature can't block this turn. Whilst both of this card's abilities fit well into an aggressive deck, most aggressive decks are going to want to play a 3-cost creature on turn 3, not an enchantment. You're not going to want this in a slower deck, and it's a terrible top deck later in the game. Overall, I don't think this is a good card at all, and I won't be picking it first. Our rare is Sanctum of Yugon, a land that taps for 1 colorless mana. Also, whenever you cast a colorless spell with converted mana cost 7 or greater, you may sacrifice this card, and if you do, you search your library for a colorless creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. For the most part, I don't think this card is all that good. The fact that it triggers off of casting an expensive spell means that you're not going to have many ways to trigger it, and, even if you do, probably not all that many targets for the search ability. This seems very much like a win more card that helps you get further ahead when you're already ahead, but it doesn't really do a lot else in other scenarios. I won't be taking this card. We also have an island and a Gideon emblem. Let's take a quick look at all the cards in our pack. I think the top choices in this pack are Royal Mage's Trick, Tightening Coils, and Demon's Grasp. Tightening Coils is the cheapest and most efficient of the 3, but has the least power. Royal Mage's Trick has the most variance, and relies on you having an amount of creatures on the board to get any value out of it. Demon's Grasp is the least efficient, but the most powerful in a vacuum. I'm a sucker for hard removal, so I think my choice today is going to be Demon's Grasp. I like Royal Mage's Trick, but I don't like the setup costs involved in making it work too much, as I've often had similar cards stuck in my hand with me unable to use them. Demon's Grasp is my pick. And that's about all we've got time for today. If you disagree with my choice, then please let me know in the comments below, on Facebook or on Twitter. Have a good day now!